What's up, historians? I'm Smith McNeill, and this is Echoes of Freedom. Together, we'll travel to America's most iconic places, uncover hidden stories, and bring the past to life. From the voices of everyday heroes to the legends we thought we knew, we'll listen to the echoes of freedom that shaped our nation. So get ready to explore, learn, and celebrate American history, one story at a time. What's up, historians? I apologize. This is going to be take 3. I think we got it this time. My microphone apparently is dead, my other one. So we're going to try this again, and hopefully this time will be the final take. But we're standing here on some family land in eastern North Carolina on the site of a doctor's office that's been in my family for many generations and is a standing testament. Kind of watching the wind because it's blowing pretty hard with that camera. It's a standing testament and a piece of living history to not just one, but 2 centuries of warfare right here in North Carolina. This site has seen, or this land holds more history than most museums. The ground is scarred by both the American Revolution and the Civil War. This place has seen gunfire, smoke, and the sacrifice from 2 different centuries, as I mentioned before, between the Civil War and the Revolutionary War. The evidence is still all around us. Bullet holes in the siding, musket balls buried beneath the soil, and stories whispering through the generations. In fact, I can see some bullet holes right here in the side of the building that are here from this time period. I'm really watching this microphone. I apologize because this is take 3 and I'm tired of talking the same thing over and over and over and forgetting what I said. So let's talk about the Revolution, where this all started. Behind us here is a house that was here during built in the 1700s, and it's still standing. In fact, there's still people living here, and if I'm going to show some of the house, I don't know if I will or not, but you'll see it right now if I do decide to show it. If not, just know it's a beautiful place. It's still standing and it's still inhabited today, 3 centuries later, and this building is still standing 3 centuries later. But during the Revolution, this region was a wild edge of the frontier, a patchwork of farms, forests, and loyalties. There weren't always big, organized armies here. Instead, it was small militia bands, neighbors turned soldiers, and clashing in ambushes, raids, and sudden firefights. So, picture this ground in the late 1770s. Militiamen in hunting shirts and tricorn hats loaded powder and ball into flintlock rifles. They'd fire from behind trees, move, reload, and fire again. Smoke hung low in the woods, and every shot cracked like thunder. On this site, we found musket balls from that era right here, flattened on impact, proof of the Revolution's fight for liberty that reached this quiet corner of North Carolina. Now, I do want to mention hiding behind trees. You're like, what is that? Well, I've talked about it before if you've seen any of the previous episodes from the Revolution series, where America, we like to get an edge on our opposition. Whatever we got to do, we're going to break the rules and make our own rules for how things should be accomplished. And that's no exception here in warfare. So traditionally, during this time, 2 armies would line up side by side on the battlefield, or across from each other on the battlefield. One side fire a volley into the other side fire back and forth until too many casualties were taken and one side quits, or it got too dark. Whoever had the most casualties would lose the battle. And that's why we see a lot of these Revolutionary era battles only lasting about a day, because it would go on until it got dark, and if the armies decided to continue the next day, so be it. But for the most part, at the end of the day, they would decide it's over, they would declare a winner, and move on. And the respectable thing to do, the proper way to fight, according to the British, would be to turn around, both armies leave the field, and that's that. Now, that's not how the Americans wanted to fight. We started coming up with this idea of guerrilla warfare, hiding behind trees and firing into the enemy as they marched along, climbing trees, whatever we had to do, take a shot and run. So that's this idea of guerrilla warfare that we're going to see expand throughout American history, all the way up to the Civil War, into the World Wars, and into present day. We kind of rewrote the Napoleonic style of warfare that was believed for all these British soldiers. So a century later, this land saw the same gunfire again, this time between Union raiders and Confederate scouts. Unlike the Revolution's flintlock, Civil War soldiers carried rifled muskets. firing conical mini bombs that spun through the air with deadly precision. We can still see their marks today, as I pointed out the bullet holes here on the side. I'm going to try to get a closer up shot to put in here. Relics from a forgotten skirmish. Maybe it's a brief cavalry encounter, a raid for supplies, or a fight between deserters. We don't really know what happened here. We just know it's a small skirmish, and most of the small skirmishes during this time are not documented because there's nothing major to talk about with them. Maybe just a handful of soldiers ran into each other, shot a couple times, and went their separate ways. Who knows? But we do know there was a small skirmish here, and I think it was happening near the end of the Civil War, because we know that General Sherman's going to make his way to Greensboro, North Carolina, which is not too far from here. Now, he's going to make his way to Greensboro, North Carolina, before he gets word from General Grant that Lee has surrendered. Matter of fact, this is from Grant's journey to Atlanta. He marches to Savannah, Georgia, and then from Savannah, he makes his way north, coming right up to Greensboro, North Carolina, where he's going to get word. He's working on meeting up with General Grant in Virginia to trap General Lee and bring an end to the Civil War. And he's going to make it as far as Greensboro, North Carolina, before he receives word Lee surrendered and the war is over. So, let's now imagine the aftermath. The smoke clears, the gunfire fades, and the wounded are left behind. In the 1800s, battlefield medicine was gritty, urgent, and often improvised. Now, I bring up medicine because I've never talked about it on the channel before, and we're standing here in front of the doctor's office. So I want to talk about some medicine. A wounded soldier in the Civil War would face grim odds. Infection was the greatest killer, and doctors knew little about germs. They knew vaguely what germs were, but not really how to combat them or treat them. Antiseptics like carbonolic acid were still experimental, and most surgeries were performed with unsterilized tools and bare hands. Let's think about Gettysburg, for example. We've got thousands of wounded soldiers that need treatment. Whereas today in modern medicine, a doctor can go perform 10 surgeries a day, and for every surgery, he's got new instruments, fresh instruments, and sterilized instruments to perform the procedure. And this time, doctors simply had what they had with them in their personal collection. So whether it be bone saws, small scalpels, knives, scissors, whatever they had was their own personal property, and that's what they took with them. So a doctor doesn't have time to clean, and he doesn't have all these tools at his disposal. He just has his own personal bag of tools. And we have thousands of soldiers. Typically what would happen is places just like this building, would become a makeshift hospital, because there are no official hospitals on battlefields during this time. So it'd be like a place like this, it's a makeshift hospital. They set up a back room to perform these procedures for amputations, because amputation was the most effective way to increase your chances of survival against infection during this time. And they would go to work, hacking off limbs with a saw. You might get some whiskey or something like that just to try to ease the pain. They might give you a bullet to bite on, which is where we get our term bite the bullet. And then the doctor would go to work. At best, if you're lucky, he's got time to get a bucket of water, maybe from a nearby lake or pond or stream or something, rinse his tools off and go for the next one. But more often than not, he would finish one arm or finish one amputation, stitch you up, send you on your way. The next person would come in, he'd go straight back to work, not even having time to wash the tools. And that's where we get a lot of this idea of infection and unsterilization. If a mini ball shattered the bone, and more often than not when it did, because the mini balls were soft, so when it hit got in your body and hit the bone, it would shatter. And it was strong enough that it would break bones and shatter your bones. So it's more than just like today, if you get shot, more than likely bullets can go through one side, out the other. A mini ball would pretty much explode inside when it hit. And then there'd send bone fragments everywhere and lead fragments everywhere. So as I mentioned, amputation was the best chance, and a skilled surgeon could remove a limb in less than 5 minutes, using only chloroform or whiskey for anesthesia. It sounds brutal, and quite frankly it was, but often it saved lives preventing gangrene. Medicine in rural areas, such like this place, relied on what was at hand, whether it be herbal, what's the word I'm looking for? Herbal substances, quinine for fever, laudanum for pain, and sometimes nothing more than prayer and perseverance. And families like mine, caught between armies, might have turned their kitchens into makeshift hospitals, using well water to wash wounds and torn linen as bandages. Even during the Revolution, soldiers faced the same harsh reality. Without organized medical corps, wounded militiamen were treated by camp doctors or carried home to recover, if they survived the infection that followed. So when we see these bullet holes in this old house, it's worth remembering that the fighting was fierce, but the suffering that followed is just as real. So I'm going to leave you with this. A few places in America tell the story of both wars. There's a handful, but not many. And this is one of these places that gets to tell a story of two wars across 2 centuries. The fight to gain freedom and the struggle to preserve it. The Revolution's musket balls and the Civil War's mini balls are separated by less than a lifetime. Yet they speak of 2 generations who fought for very different visions of the same nation. As historian Bruce Catton once said, the American story is one of rebirth, again and again through conflict and courage. And right here, that rebirth happened twice. So stay tuned. I'm bringing on a family member right now to tell you more about the history of this place. All right, historian. So I'm here with Al. He's kind of the owner of this property here, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about the history of the place and some more things that happened around this timeline. So take it away.
Thank you, Smith. Yeah, this has been family property here since the early 1800s. This building right here was built by a lawyer. His name was Atlas Jones. And so in the 1820s, this building was built. He used his loft, and then he actually remodeled the house, which you can't see, which was originally built in the 1700s. And when he left, my great grandfather bought the land and gave it to his son, who is my grandfather. It's very complicated. So my grandfather was the first person to practice medicine in this building. And you can't see the other part, but he practiced in this little building here until 1931, and then the other part was built. And the way this practice worked was people just showed up in the yard, and then they waited their turn. And you never knew what was going to come across the hill. You had everything from a broken arm to people been in fires, everything. So, and as far as talking about transportation, there weren't any hospitals anywhere nearby. So if you had a heart attack or some kind of injury that you needed care, you just moved in the house. And his daughters took care of you how long it took, however many days, that period of time. So really interesting. And the thing is that when he got through seeing patients here, he had a driver. He would drive them around first in a buggy and then later in a car. And then he would go make house calls, if you can believe that, all night long, and then come back and do the same thing the next day. So it was quite a grueling life, but he was a farmer also, and he remarked in one of his speeches I saw at the Medical Society sometime in the 1920s about how he could never ever make a living practicing medicine because people didn't have the money. But there's a lot of quilts and chickens and things that he got. So he said he was glad he had this farm. So we're real fortunate that all this has been able to stay in the family for that long, and I hope it'll stay in for a lot longer.
I'm always excited to come and visit and check it out.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite sites to visit, other than Gettysburg, it's hard to beat Gettysburg.
Oh yeah.
It's one of my favorite sites to visit, especially since it's part of my family history, and there's a lot of rich history here. So guys, we hope you've enjoyed this episode. Remember, freedom comes at a cost, and it's paid through warfare, and the warfare is brought to us with the assistance of doctors who work there. The red goes behind us. But it's brought to us by the doctors who work the buildings just like this one. And it's awesome to be standing here listening to the echoes of freedom in eastern North Carolina. Stay tuned. We'll see you on the next adventure.